All right, welcome to Snapdragon Wellness, everyone. Today we have a special guest. This is my friend Gideon, and we are going to talk a lot about different things today, including Asian, American, and Pacific Islander heritage, since it is Heritage Awareness Month for these cultures. So we are going to talk about some of those things today. So I will have Gideon first introduce himself and tell us a little bit about him.
Well, first off, thank you, Nicole. It's really great to be here, and I just appreciate everything that you've been doing. So, I am ethnically Chinese, but born in Malaysia. I know we've got a lot of things to talk about, and one of the things that just even resonates right off the bat is, what's your favorite food? Well, part of growing up in Malaysia is because it's a crossroads of so many cultures. That means all the food are also kind of there. So it's really interesting that when I think about things like this, it's a different mindset where the latest fad of like, ooh, it's a fusion of foods that are combined together. Well, I kind of grew up with that. So it's kind of cool to see that catching up, so to speak, like a processing time lag where I grew up with that and now I get to see other people get to enjoy that. But happy to be here.
Nice. Tell me a little bit about what the importance of this month is to you.
I'm going to say something that's so cliche. As I was thinking about that, I never really appreciated some of those things, maybe because I grew up outside of the Asian American culture, at least initially, since I moved over here as an immigrant when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I made an assumption that the multicultural mix is just something that everyone should expect. The irony is that for me, it was more of, growing up, there weren't as many Caucasians. Even though my uncle was from the UK and so forth, it was still kind of a novelty, so it was kind of reverse in that respect. But the more I have spent time here, the more I've spent time internationally, and realized that until we find a different planet, this is it. We definitely do need to appreciate each other's culture. And it's great that food is a big part of that, but it's the understanding of how we were raised. And here's the reality, and I can admit this. Sometimes we can accidentally take the best of every culture, which is awesome. And unfortunately, sometimes we can take the worst of every culture, and that also is a problem. And I think that's kind of both the strength and the interesting things, but it's kind of like even in leading a team in general, that diversity of skill sets. Not everyone's going to be great at everything, not everyone's going to be bad at everything.
Right.
But can we shore each other's weaknesses, blind spots, if you will, and recognize that happens. So for me, I think more so than ever in this season, it's important that we recognize that these differences exist, but they don't have to be a barrier between ourselves. They can instead be bridges. And honestly, enjoy it, because I know we're going to talk about food, and why would we not want to try some of the wonderful things that are just amazing?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's an amazing point. And I think a lot of times we sometimes tend to highlight the differences and focus so much on the differences that we can't even celebrate those differences and appreciate our similarities at the same time. So absolutely. So how has your heritage shaped who you are today?
I think when it comes to heritage, what's really interesting is that even though I am ethnically Chinese, I've never really spent any time in mainland China. However, listening to your talks, listening to your trainings, there are things that culturally start before we're even born. So the term like feast and famine is something that the Chinese population, going all the way back to, Romance of the Three Kingdoms and pick any Chinese show at that point, is a real thing. The agricultural situations that you never knew when you were going to get food again. I grew up in a situation where it was like a weird mix of poverty and richness at the same time, both within Malaysia and then moving here as an immigrant because of the exchange rates and so forth. So there were times when you didn't know whether you were going to have enough to eat. So you ate really quickly and you ate everything that was in front of you. On top of the general unfortunate kind of Asian false guilt of like, well, think of those starving children and fill in the blank, which many of us grew up, pick a continent, pick a country, and suddenly you are just forced to kind of do that. But there's a reason behind that. And unfortunately, it's generally fear-driven, but it's a legitimate fear at times of that famine. Which also means that when we're feasting, we're eating everything that's going there. So I say from a heritage perspective, and I know I talk about food only because I know we talk about food, but when it comes to other things mentally or emotionally, that can come out as clingy, that can come out as hoarding, that can come off as I'm a big Star Wars fan, where you like try to hold on tight to things, and what ends up happening is that not only do you lose it, you crush it and you smother it. I think as an Asian American, that those are things that can be our strengths and superpowers, unfortunately can double as our kryptonite. Our tenacity and our resilience can sometimes also mean that this doesn't become strength, it becomes a weird sort of, dare I say, perverted weakness at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, is that we are really shaped in general from the time that we're very, very young, and how a lot of those impacts or privileges, if you will, can lead through our young adult life into adulthood. And it really takes rewriting a lot of these messages that we received, or impacts that were had on us, to be able to balance a little better now and shift a little bit of how we adapt and grow now, how we process things now. And it's not forgetting those things and rewriting them out of our history, or completely demolishing them from who we are and who we were, but how we can still celebrate some of those things that made us who we are, while recognizing too when some things might not be the healthiest things for us now.
I remember having one of my first sessions with a therapist, and it just annoyed me, and it started to anger me, but I realized it was out of frustration for me. Every time he would start the session with, "So Gideon, how are you feeling?" And I go, "I don't know how to answer that. I barely know what a feeling is." And after the third time, because I was kind of tired of burning 7 minutes multiplied by $5, whatever the price was at that point, I said, "I need you. Please help me. I need a sheet of feelings. That way, like a menu, I can just point and all that." But what I really appreciate is this therapist, without skipping a beat, turns around, prints me a copy of a piece of paper, front and back, with a bunch of feelings. It must be 200 on there. And now I had that. And that allowed me, like training wheels, for about 10 or 15 sessions afterwards. I would use that as my cheat sheet, and I would point things out there. I don't carry one of those with me anymore, but I'm telling you something that happened over 10 years ago, which forced me to learn this. And I was an adult at that point. I had already been deployed before. I had already experienced lots of things, and yet, before Inside Out was even a movie, I couldn't figure out some of these things. The stigma is driven by many things. It is absolutely self-perpetuated. You talked about community. It can absolutely be community perpetuated. And I think we have to be really honest with ourselves as a community, as a culture at times, and go, that is foolish. No ifs, no buts. That is foolish. That is not strength. It can be seen, sure, as a strength in a very short near term, but that is not real generational investment. And worse, that can be generational degradation, not just for the next one, but the next one, because I have nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
And I have seen them already being impacted. And it is something that my sister-in-law and I talk about, and we have already been planning, going, what do we need to do now? And my niece just turned 13, I know, because she stopped responding to my texts, but she's a teenager. And I fully expect, as she continues to grow into a young woman, and whatever relationships that she continues to have. Yeah. So this is extremely personal, but it's also extremely important. And I hope that those who are listening to this will seek the help that they need to, because asking for help is not a weakness. Asking for help is wisdom.
Yeah, and that's something I say all the time too, is that,
first, your whole journey with figuring out emotions, where would you unlearn that, first of all, right? Where do we learn emotionality and being able to identify those emotions to begin with? We learn that from modeling. We learn that from the people around us, typically our parents. So if our parents don't have good emotional IQ or good emotional language, how are we supposed to develop that, right? So it's not ridiculous that you're an adult human and had to have a printed feelings list, because where would you have learned that otherwise, right? And a lot of the time, I talk to people about, we tend to gravitate towards the feelings and the emotions and talk about them that are the non-vulnerable emotions, right? So we tend to talk about things like, oh, I'm happy, or I'm angry. I'm angry, I'm happy. Those are about it, right? So when we're sad, we're angry. When we're anxious, we're angry. When we're emotional or hurt, we're angry, right? Because angry is seen as more of a strong emotion, if you will, like an intense emotion, like a power. It's power, it's control. And it's easier to express because of that. It's not as vulnerable. It's the things like sadness, being hurt, being upset, being worried, being all of these things that people feel as those are vulnerable. So then we don't identify our emotions that way, because it makes us feel like we're vulnerable, right? And it makes us feel weak. And to your point, I say that all the time. To be able to talk about and express your emotions and identify them isn't weakness. That actually takes a hell of a lot of strength to do, right? It's to be vulnerable isn't weak. It actually takes a heck of a lot of bravery and strength to be able to be vulnerable.
What's really interesting about that idea that anger being a strong emotion, I will tell you that from a weird cultural perspective, I think the word that's coming to mind is stoic, where many Asian cultures, let's just say East Asian, Southeast Asian, because I think West Asians and Southwest Asians allow themselves to be more expressive in their, whether it's their hand movements, which I can see this going on with my own hand, or with their faces. But anger, interestingly enough, is generally seen as a negative emotion. I mean, even the Inside Out movie or most things. But what I have learned is the emotion itself is neither good nor bad. But what am I angry about? What is someone else angry about? If I'm angry against injustice, that is a good thing. If I'm angry that I didn't stretch or push myself when I could have and I took the easy way out, that's part of it. If I'm angry that someone is being hurt and they need to be defended, I think those are good things. And maybe I now tell people what you're angry about, maybe things that you are passionate about. So I am angry at incompetent leadership, that destructive and damaging leadership and management, which is why I focus on that and I try to do what I can and for myself, my team members, and as I grow leadership for them.
I appreciate you sharing about your diabetes and even the stigma and the shame and guilt surrounding that, when it's not even a mental health thing, right? It is something your body is doing to you, right? But I know a lot of that is tied into culture, food, nutrition, overall health, all of those pieces. So, to kind of close with some of that, tell me a little bit about some of those pieces, if you don't mind, if you're interested.
When we were discussing some of the topics that you wanted to go to, I know one of the questions that came to mind as we were discussing was, what are some of my favorite foods? And I remember texting you going, well, I think the problem is that I love the diversity and the inclusion of all sorts of food, and I will throw in the equity there. I want people to be fed. And as a result of that, I eat just about everything. And the Asian culture is very carb heavy. I would say there are many cultures like that. Our carb of choice is rice. And as a result of that, and that plus the feast and famine means that literal spikes of eating is probably associated with everything that's going on from a diabetes standpoint. The fact that I have been deployed to war zones and combat zones on top of that, and not dealing with that healthily. Also, just on top of that, it's whether it's stress eating, which I did see a recent video on that, or it's whatever other activities with not sleeping properly, not resting properly, so forth. I think food is a wonderful thing. I think it connects people. Whether it's coffee, tea, a meal, fellowship, right? Breaking bread, even this, that. I don't think breaking rice is a thing, but if you've ever been to a family dinner of sorts, right? You just got little, it's not a turntable, that's what a DJ, the lazy Susan. I don't know why Susan's lazy. It could be the lazy Joe.
I always ask that.
Whatever that lazy, could be lazy Gideon, I couldn't care less, but everything's rotating there and so forth, and just go. And then, of course, now you've got, I just remember, man, it was always grandma. Grandma's always like, eat more, eat more, eat more. Even though it was grandma that also told you needed to lose weight. So it's very confusing times.
Very much so.
Cognitive dissonance. But yeah, it's they want you to be fed.
Food is happiness.
Food is happiness. But I just remember, wow, when my parents knew that I had diabetes, they would still drop food off, but not like healthy stuff, like snacks and things where I go, I'm very sure Coach Nicole told me not to eat this. And I kept telling them, like, do you want me to live? I know, being really dramatic at this point. And I think that's the thing, is that, like you said, because they don't have a certain level of intelligence or whatever they inherited, they only know how to do what they know how to do. So they're like, yeah, you're gonna get fed. But they're not thinking about the healthy part of it, the over holistic health of it. They, especially for immigrant parents, but even in many Asian cultures, they want you to be successful. Yeah. But the definition of successful sometimes is only limited to these certain things. I think about video games, right? And sometimes at the beginning you have to customize your character, and you get 100 points, and do you want to put them towards strength or agility and all that? And certain cultures just put it all in like 2 buckets, and then the other 50 buckets you're like, And then when you don't survive the first boss fight, you're like, what happened? Well, because you chose to put everything into, I don't know, brains, but you have no muscles to move, so sorry, you're done for strike. But when it comes to food and so forth, I think one of the sessions I attended with you is, even before we're born, this was mind-blowing. Whatever my parents ate, specifically whatever my mom ate, I inherited. Not just from a microbial gut health, but even just patterns of eating. And now that we're talking about it, because it's so hot in Malaysia, from an equator problem, we would go to school like 6 in the morning to about 12, 1 o'clock. But just like some cultures, like siestas, nothing happens for about 5-6 hours until the sun goes down. So you know what that means, Nicole? I am eating at late hours, and I'm talking all the way to like 12, 1 o'clock. So I was a college student before I was a college student when it came to that. And that carries over with my sleeping, my eating, and so forth. I like what you said earlier about what we can do as a community, and I hope and I challenge that we don't get to choose who we're born into. We can have a whole philosophical conversation, but currently that technology does not exist. But as the older I get, I do appreciate that as we have free will, we get to choose who our family are in a different sort of way. And it's not to say that you just abandon those who are quote unquote toxic, because those are people that are hurting too. But we also have to, we have to choose people that are going to be supportive and not be like yes people, but also challenge and stretch us and encourage us to do good things. And Nicole, you and I worked out together. There are days I don't want to do anything, but just seeing you there and just hearing that we're pushing, we're going through, 55 minutes later, it's totally worth it. And that's just 55 minutes. And now you're looking at the seasons and journey of life.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. But thank you for being here today.
Gideon, everyone, thank you for joining us as a wonderful guest today. I think your knowledge and our discussion is absolutely invaluable, and really appreciate your willingness to come and chat with us today about Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So we hope to have you back to chat about some other things that come up throughout the year, and appreciate you being here.